Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry I'm a little late. I had a hard time getting Zoom to launch. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen and show you a few things. Okay, so I've gone ahead and set up the teams for your projects. So we have Kendall, Miriam, Gautam, Gia. Tell me if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly.
You can just call me TJ.
Okay, TJ. Okay.
It's Gautam.
Gerardo, Justin, Matthew, and Christina, and on one team, and then Cassie, Austin, Anthony, and both of the Austins are on the same team. That's good. That's easier for me. All right, so those are the teams right now, and then if you click on the link, you'll have their email address. Okay, so let's go ahead and get going. So our first chapter, oops, screen sharing, gotta go to the screen. I'm just gonna go to desktop, it's easier. Okay, so for our first chapter, we're just doing an overview. Okay, so what we're looking at is in order to compete, we need to take a look at the global economy and globalization in general, changes to technology, and keep in mind that that changes so fast. And the importance of knowledge and people having knowledge, both internal and external to your organization. Okay, so we have the formulate in creating competitive advantage. Your formulating and implementing a value creating strategy. And you have commitments and actions to achieve, and you want them to be above average. And you need to think about what the firm will do and how do you create competitive advantage. And you also need to consider what the firm will not do, because there's a lot going on in running a business and marketing, leadership, operations, finance, and your IT. Different businesses will focus on different things. Okay, so this is just a breakdown what we're going to cover. So right now we're going to talk about the external environment, and then chapter 3, all of this we're talking about analysis. So external today, internal next week. Remember, we're not meeting on Monday because of the holiday. And then on we have 6 chapters on formulation of your strategy, and then 4 chapters on implementing your strategy. And all this coalesces into creating your strategic advantage and creating returns that are above average. Okay, so the global landscape is competitive, and where it's increasing is in rapid changes in markets and the blurring of market boundaries. So a product that you thought existed by itself might actually, and over time, become part of a different market. So globalized flow of financial capital. Back in the day, it used to be that you invested locally or within your own company, or you received funding in that way. Now, not so much. I mean, banks are owned from all over the world. You borrow from big and small institutions all over the world. You definitely sell stock on an open exchange. You need to be flexible, you need to be fast, you need to think on your feet of original ideas. and you need to use your technology in a way that integrates as much as possible into one decision making tool. And for that reason, that's why products like Salesforce are doing so well, because they're what are called enterprise solutions, and into one product you can roll the tracking of your consumers, the products they're buying, pricing, and roll that into also your invoicing, all of that, so that it's one database. Okay. So also increasing are the strategic and operational complexity of global scale competition, and product standards. The public demands more of us. Okay. And with the advent of, it used to be that if you wanted to learn more about a company, you looked at the Better Business, you looked at the Better Business Bureau and Consumer Reports. Now, with all of the social media out there, there's Yelp for the longest time that told us a little bit more about small businesses. But with things like Instagram and Twitter, you can call out a company by hashtagging it, and you can tell the world about how that company really uh, did well by you, or you can call them out to the world about how you are dissatisfied with their service or product. So what's decreasing right now? We don't have as much time to adapt to change. And we don't have the traditional sources of competitive advantage. We'll talk more about that as we move through our chapters. And our traditional managerial mindset has changed. Okay. So, strategic options in a very competitive environment. So, what's going into that? And that's that our economy is becoming more global, and also technology contributes to this hyper competitive environment. So, what does this create? It creates the use of price quality positioning to build market presence. So, price and quality, and how you tell people that you're doing that, build your market presence. The creation of new know how and user of first mover advantage. So, if you're the first person to bring your product to market or your service to market, you have an advantage. And then protection or invasion of established geographic or product markets. So there is a lot, in terms of competition, a lot of things going on where people are going to try to duplicate you, and they could be duplicating you where you actually exist, or they could be duplicating you somewhere else in the world. Okay. And how do you take control of that? Or do you even care to take control of that? Okay. So, who are the top corporate performers? So, you have to have an entrepreneurial mindset. And we put in here opportunistic because we hear this word entrepreneurial over and over again. And it gets thrown a lot around a lot. But what you really need to think about is opportunity. And how are you going to find that, grasp that, and get that to market? And then are your market and customer needs oriented and making effective use of valuable competencies, and offer new and innovative products and services? So, when we think about Southwest Airlines, okay, they had this idea, and they were pretty new in these idea of these short flights, okay, and they don't run out of the expensive hubs. So when you're talking about flying into Chicago, okay, you're not talking about the big airport where it's more expensive to keep park your airplanes. When you fly into Chicago and you're on Southwest, you fly into Midway. Okay. Um, and they're meeting this customer need because people people need a cheaper way to fly. All right. Yes, it's kind of a pain. We no longer get food, and maybe we only get our peanuts once, and the soda pops that they distribute are half the size of a can. But at the end of the day, we really do just want to get from point A to point B. and Southwest has decided that's what they're going to um, market. Okay. And then offer new and innovative products and services. So again, back in the day, they were it. So technology trends impact the global competitive market. And technology is changing at an exponential rate. And there is an emergence of technologies that disrupt or they change how you deliver a product. And then the information age. So the internet and the proliferation of low cost computing has enabled many of the smaller businesses to do more than they would have in the past. And then the increasing knowledge intensity has become a source of, has become a resource, but it's not something you can hold. All right, it's intangible, and this creates a competitive advantage. Oh no, remind me later. Sorry about that. My screen just decided to do all kinds of interesting things. Okay, so what's involved in being flexible? So you have to cope with uncertainty. So you have to know how to react when you see it coming. And you also have to estimate in advance some of the risks and the returns. You must you must overcome built up organizational inertia. So just because you feel like you're headed in one direction doesn't mean you can stay there. And you need to continuously develop your capacity to learn and apply new and updated skill sets, right? You need to become a learning organization. You need to make sure that the people employed at your organization have the money and the time to go to groups where they're learning the most about, let's say, their project managers, get them their PMP certification, make sure they're continuing their education there. Um, there's many different organizations that will keep your people up to date. And so, yes, there is staying up to date in terms of the product, and there are organizations for that. But just the different departments, you need to make sure that those individuals are up to date in best practice. Okay, so your strategic choices. So this comes down to Porter's 5 forces. So economies of scale. So if you recall from your economics class, economies of scale are this idea that it costs you less to produce your 101st product than it does to produce your 100th product. Okay. So the idea revolves around your fixed cost because at a certain point, all right, you know what you're paying for your overhead, but what you're paying to produce each individual product is costing less and less per unit. Barriers to market entry. So if you're going into a new market, you're producing a new product or service, then how hard is it going to be to get into the market? But conversely, let's say you were the first mover into the market or you're one of the top five. How easy it is how easy is it for some new organization to step into your market and say, okay, we can duplicate this. All right. Where and then diversification. To what extent do you want to offer different versions of your product? Okay. And then that's also product differentiation. And then industry concentration. How many are in your industry? And then market friction. So how do the markets interact together, and are they interacting in a way that supports what you're doing? Are they interacting in a way that makes it more difficult to complete what you're doing as a business? So the IO model of that average return, above average returns, and you might have seen this in your organizational behavior class. So you want to study the external environment and pay close attention to the industry. Um, One way to look at the industry is through Mintel reports, MINTEL reports. You can access those through public libraries. uh, you need to locate an industry with high potential for above average returns. And you need to identify the strategy called for by the attractive industry to earn above average returns and develop or acquire the skills needed to implement your strategy and make use of this firm's strengths in order to take advantage of your opportunities and supply above average returns. So, um, okay. So, what's in this IO model? So, you're saying that the external environment has certain pressures and constraints that determine what kind of strategic choices you're making. And similarly, in strategically relevant resources, it causes competitors to pursue similar strategies. Resource differences among competitors are short lived due to resource mobility across firms. So, what this all means is that uh, when you're looking at an industry, it starts to coalesce into something where a lot of the strategies look the same, and you want a strategy that doesn't look like other people's. And lastly, strategic decision makers uh, are rational and are engaging in profit maximizing behaviors. Okay. There are other behaviors that you might engage in. Some organizations really set themselves up on a very long-term plans. You know, instead of a 3-year plan, they might set themselves up for a 10-year plan, and they have a lot of capital. So since they're doing that, they're not looking at profit maximization right away. They might be looking more at brand recognition right away. Okay, so the 5 forces model of competition. So this comes out of Porter, and it is I deposited an article in your Moodle that you can use and quote from in the writing of your case study. And the 5 forces model is at the backbone of a strategy. If you were going to go into an interview for a job and you wanted to do some research, you might throw out some words here about potential entrants. Maybe you think the firm could go into a certain market. Your What are the substitutes that people could purchase instead of your product? So yes, people could substitute Pepsi for Coke. That's one way to look at the market, and that's sodas. But if you're thinking about beverages, people could start drinking a lot more coconut water than they are drinking Coke. So you have to start thinking about these substitutes. Your suppliers have a lot to do with how your organization creates return. Because do the suppliers have the power? Can they stick you with a price? Or are you the one in control of the pricing? The same goes for buyers. Who's in control of that price at the end of the day? Is it the buyer who sets the pricing, or are you the one who sets the pricing? Okay. Um, so your rate of return on invested capital relative to the cost of capital is part of looking at the interactions among the 5 forces. So, when you're talking about industry attractiveness, you need to look at above average returns in producing standard goods or services, and that's called the cost leadership strategy. You could also look at producing differentiated goods or services, and this is where customers are willing to pay a premium price because your product is so different. So, a differentiation strategy might be the way in which, um, let's see. So, Ralph Lauren has it's high-end clothing, Ralph Lauren, but they decided to open up the lines of Lauren, Lauren, so you could obtain very similar products, but at a much reduced rate. Now, Gap went in a different direction. So before there was Old Navy or Banana Republic, there was the Gap. And it was pretty much a middle range product. They were selling products that you would hold on to for a while because they were sturdy. You know, they don't have a lot of different kinds of suits for men and women. They've got your gray, your navy, maybe your tan. All right. Now let's take to consider the Banana Republics. Banana Republics have an actual line, okay? And they do things based upon what seems to be trendy. But unlike Old Navy, the kind of trend they want to take part in are the very, for older people, for people who tend to collect fashion. At one point, uh, uh, Banana Republic did a special cycle of products that related to the Dr. Zhivago movie. You know, all those Russian warm weather inspired hats and coats and gloves. Um, and then they had Old Navy, which was their fast fashion line. So the jeans are not as sturdy, and the t-shirts won't last you as long, but they're really gorgeous and they're really appropriate for people who are younger and don't want to put as much money into their clothes and are really planning to put money into the long-term clothing a little later in their life. So, how do you build competitive advantage? So, you need to look at your resources, and they are both tangible and intangible. So, you have physical resources like your plants and your equipment. Okay. You have human resources. Whoops. And then you have things that are, um, and organizational capital. So that's money, straight up. That's money. But then you have intangible capital. So that's intelligence, and that is human intelligence. And then that's also things like any patents you might hold. All right. And then capacity. So how do you work together your your operations and your finances and what's available there to create your product? And then core competence. So what's a source of competitive advantage? So at some point we're going to take a look at the value chain and we, hello? Oh, okay. I thought I had a question. We'll take a look at the value chain and we'll talk more about core competency. And I have to apologize if something goes wonky. My cat is banging on the computer. So firms have different resources and they develop unique capabilities based on how they combine and use the resources. There are many resources that a firm could make use of, but it's going to be part of your strategy to decide where are your strengths and which resources you're going to exploit. Now, resources and certain capabilities are not highly mobile across firms, and there are differences in resources and capabilities that are the basis of competitive advantage and a firm's performance rather than its industry's structural characteristic. So your organization is going to be unique. And yes, there are ways in which all of all of your competition have similarities, but you need to find a way to differentiate yourself from from the other organizations in your industry. And we're not just talking about making a different product. Some people build a really good firm from the, for themselves based solely on the customer experience, right? So Apple doesn't really make new products. Apple makes other people's products look better, and maybe uh, even they improve the product so that it's a little bit more streamlined in terms of use, so the user experience is better when you use an Apple product. But the other side of their customer engagement is just really being able to do things like walk you through a setup or troubleshoot a problem with your computer on the phone. If not, make up an appointment for you with the Genius Bar. So resources as core competencies. So these are costly to imitate, right? It's very hard to have the same core competency as somebody else, okay? When we're talking about resources, they are rare, okay? And resources, pretty much, there aren't any substitutes for it. And they are incredibly valuable. So don't overlook resources in terms of uh, how you can create competitive advantage there. So when we're talking about the resource-based model of above average returns, we're talking about looking at the capability of an integrated set of resources to integratively perform a task or activity. So when you put together your people and their know-how with the robotics at your organization, can you make something faster? Can you make it better? Okay, competitive advantage. So ability of a firm to outperform its rivals. So are you faster? Are you making a more beautiful product? Are you, in the case of fashion, making a product that's accessible to more people? Or are you making a product that people with a lot more money are going to want to buy? Okay. Is the industry attractive? So industries with opportunities that can be exploited by the firm's resources and capabilities. So you don't want to go into an industry where you don't have the resource and capability to compete. Okay, and strategy formulation and implementation. So strategic actions taken to earn above average return and superior returns. So you create earnings of above average returns. So when you're talking about competitive strategy decisions, you need to look at the industry organization model, and you need to look at the resource-based model. So when you envision your organization, it's an enduring word picture of what the firm wants to be and expects to achieve in the future. So when you're talking about your vision statement, you're talking about the future of your organization. You're supposed to create something lofty that's going to stretch and challenge your people, and it reflects your values and your aspirations. It's really most effective when in the development of the statement, you include all the stakeholders. So you don't want your vision to come from the top down. You want to include different levels of participants within the organization, so employees, but you also want to include people like investors, right? Maybe the press, maybe consumers, all right? When we talk about stakeholders, we're talking out, my cat's biting me. Out, go away, stop biting me. Okay. Um, so you want to look at multiple stakeholders, and you need to take a look at what's internal to your firm. So your strengths, your weaknesses, but you want to also take a look at what's going on externally. So opportunities and threats. And you need upper management to really be bought into what is the vision, especially when you're talking about something that's created by all stakeholders. A lot of times, words and ideas, an organization will hire a consulting firm and work through developing a vision, and management will say, yay, we went through the exercise of this, but this is too hard to do, or this was an exercise and now we're done working through this type of thing. You don't want that. Management has to take an active role and interest in your vision. So a mission statement is different. So it specifies a present business or business in which the firm intends to compete and customers it intends to serve. So it's more concrete and it's focused more on the present or the close present, and you're looking at your products and your customers rather than the organization's vision. Uh, your mission should be inspiring. Okay. So the primary stakeholders are individuals, groups, and organizations. So these can affect the development of the firm's vision and mission, and they are affected by the outcomes of a firm's strategy. Can have enforceable claims on the firm's performance. So if you have a vision or a mission, you have to have ways to celebrate it and consequences for when things are not completed. And these are influential when they're done in control of critical or valued resources. Okay, so how do you classify your stakeholders? So you have your capital market stakeholders and your product market stakeholders and your organizational stakeholders. So capital market, so people who invest in your firm. So these are people buying stock or buying your bonds, right? Product market stakeholders. These are your purchasers, these are your buyers, but these are also your suppliers. And then you have the organizational stakeholders. So, to be more specifically, shareholders, major suppliers of capital. And again, you derive capital from lending. So, I'm including bondholders as well. Product market stakeholders, again, I said customers and suppliers. There's also host communities and unions. And then organizational stakeholders, so employees, managers, and non managers. Okay. So, the conflicting expectations of shareholders and lenders. So, they want to preserve their investment and they're taking a look at your risk and return. And when you think about, you might remember this from corporate finance, when you look at uh, the stock market for 100 years, it returns 11.5%. So, if you were to generally invest in the stock market, you'd expect um, over, let's say you bought stock and then it keeps passing through your family, you're down to your grandchildren and maybe your great grandchildren, they're expecting at least 11.5% by the 100th year, right? So you need to beat this. You need to work very hard to beat this, right? In terms of return, and you need to garner that return with as little risk as possible. Um, so people want wealth, all right? And how do your shareholders uh, derive wealth from you? So for anyone buying stock, eventually they want dividends. You know, you can keep saying it's worth more, it's worth more, it's worth more. And your firm is worth more. But eventually you need to start paying out dividends. And The lenders, they want their interest. That's where they're creating their wealth. Okay. And then your shareholders have influence over how others perceive your organization. So, we talked about suppliers and customers. So, types of product market stakeholders. So, host communities. So, communities that are selling your product, and then unions. Okay. So, unions are different than your employees. You need to think of them as a separate kind of stakeholder. So, you are responsible for the human capital of your organization, and you need to continually educate and keep current the skills of your employees. You need to create a culture where people want to work for you, where they're walking in and they feel that the work is ethical, that they are, it's little tiny things. Like people should be comfortable in their chair. You need to supplying ergonomics in an organization, making sure it's not all work, work, work all the time, but that there's people are genuinely given permission to leave their desk and have a lunch. Okay. Strategic goals and global standards. So you, as management, are in charge of setting goals, knowing what the global standards are, and moving your organization so that these two work together. And you're also responsible for international assignments. So, strategic leadership, when you're strong at this, you have an orientation that relies on analysis before you take action. You can't look at a stock market and guess. All right. You need to understand the calculations. Now, no leader works well trying to do everything. You need to hire the right people, trust them. But if you want to be a C suite person, if you want to be chief executive, chief operations, chief information, chief marketing, uh, chief finance officer, you have to be able to read from all the departments, take that in, digest those reports. Strategic leaders, they're located at various levels of the firm. So you have managers who have their expertise, directors who have their expertise, vice presidents who have their expertise. And remember that nobody's holding all the information and all the cards unless everybody's talking. So you don't want an organization where people are siloed. And organization silos can take place in many different ways. Maybe the department is silo. Maybe nobody likes IT. Okay. That doesn't work. All right. Because when IT is doing its job right, all the communications are working well across the organization. Maybe you have this sense across the firm where all of the um, people working in the administration roles are really resentful of everybody who has more of the analysis level roles. And so you really need to work on making sure there are no bridges and no silos. Um, Strategic leaders are really invested in helping people to accomplish more. Have somebody you are training to do your job. This sounds kind of counterintuitive, but for you to move up, your boss has to recognize that you're taking care of your people. So you need to push people to accomplish something and you need to make them feel that you want them promoted. Strategic leaders, they're innovative. Okay. Um, One of the things that I've learned is that don't hold brainstorming meetings sitting down. Stand up, give people stickies, get them to a board, a whiteboard, have them writing things down, throwing stickies up on the walls. Don't hold brainstorming with people sitting down. It's a waste of everybody's time. Okay. Strategic leaders can leverage the relationships with external parties and promote exploratory learning. So, who are external parties? So, again, we're going back to talking to people who are also in your industry, okay? And there are lots of affinity groups in that way, and also being part of membership organizations oriented around the function of an individual, be that a program manager or an accountant or a financial analyst. Okay. And have a global mindset when you're thinking about management. You really do want to look at how everybody views management. For the longest time, people were fascinated with how the Japanese managed their workers because it was so different, and the Japanese were performing so well. They were just outperforming um, the American companies in regard to producing cars. And part of that is because they empowered every employee to say something's wrong. It used to be you could visit this Toyota plant that was down in South San Francisco. They have a bell next to every workstation that somebody could pull and say, "There's something wrong. The car I just looked at, this is wrong in it." So that instead of having the car completely off the lot and then doing an inspection, and 200 cars have been created that are missing a bolt in them, with everybody along the line inspecting work ahead of them and then doing their job, you're checking as you're doing your job. That was such a new concept to US firms. Okay. So when we're looking at analysis, we need to look at the external environment and the internal environment. Then, when we're looking at strategies, what are you doing at a business level? What are you doing to create marketplace competition? What are your corporate level strategies? How do you diversify your portfolio management? What are your international strategies? What are your cooperative strategies? And then in performance, your governance mechanisms, okay, your organizational structure, your strategic leadership, and how are you being entrepreneurial within your organization? What's your strategic entrepreneurship? Okay, so I'm leaving this slide up. So I want everybody to pick um, a company, all right, that produces cell phones. I'm going to put you into groups, and I want you to pick a cell phone, all right, and I want you to let's just work on product, all right, just the product. And I want you to think about what are the strengths and the weaknesses of that product. So let me break you up into small groups. I'm trying to get this going here. Gonna so the thing is that I want you to do is I want you to think about a cell phone product and what are the strengths and the weaknesses of the product. And later, as we go forward, we're going to start talking about the strengths and weaknesses of a company. But let's just talk about a product. All right. So let's see. Let's go ahead and do. I'm going to go ahead and do. Oh, I can't get this to change. Let's do 3 groups. All right. I'm going to put you in 3 groups. I'm going to give you uh 15 minutes, I would say, for this. And then let's come back and have a discussion. So if we're talking about 15 minutes, then let's go ahead and let's meet at 5 past. And wait, I'm just going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I was on mute. Okay, so who from the iPhone group wants to talk about strengths and weaknesses?
I guess I can start.
Okay.
So for strengths for iPhones, we said that compared to other phones on the market, Apple tries to make it more of a simplistic software system. So it's easier to use. Like you don't need to be a tech wizard to understand how it works. And if you need help, there is like you could go to Apple and ask them for help on how to use your devices. And there is like the app that's like the tips app, and that shows you super easily how to use the stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Call and Genius. Okay. So what are the weaknesses? How about we have a different speaker from that group? Okay.
A weakness that they have is that although they make other Apple products easy to use, it's hard to use those products with different phones from different companies.
Excellent. Excellent. Did you say with phones from other companies or?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
Additionally, for a
Mhm.
weakness, we also said that they're very expensive.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree there. Okay. So what about the Pixel?
So for the Google Pixel, we found out one of the strengths is that it is affordable. It's only
Mm-hmm.
$699.
Mm-hmm.
The other phones.
Okay. Okay, what else?
And that it also it uses an Android software, which is it's simpler than what the iPhone would use or their software.
Okay. How about weaknesses? Let's have another speaker.
One of the main weaknesses was that you're forced to be using a 128 GB storage. Like that's your only option. We've also heard questionable things about their speakers. It was okay speakers, not as good as the competition. I think Matthew had some other weaknesses that you got down.
There's no, like, just with the things that come with it, there's just a lot of things missing. There's no earbuds in the box unless you're somebody who lives in Australia and France, according to what the source says. And and actually surprising, this has been labeled as a pro, but I find it could be actually not work very well. I think that there's like a feature that sounds good on the surface, like if you're in a car accident, your phone will like detect it and it will automatically like dial 911 and show the police like your location. But I think it was another member in the group that well, actually for me first, I just simply thought it's just a personal opinion, but I just find anything that really finds like your personal stuff about you and like shares it with somebody that quickly feels kind of creepy. But another member kind of pointed out, like, what if you fell down the stairs and like the phone accidentally took it as an accident and then police came to your house for no actual serious issue?
Yep.
There's also if missing, there's absolutely no SD card slot if so that's going to be a problem if you're somebody who's simply hoping for that. There's also, I think, I know somebody already said, but there's no 3.5 millimeter audio jack too.
Right. Oh, there's no audio jack. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's very limiting. And then there's some things that kind of somewhat like destroy the pros with like the OLED display. Like it sounds at the beginning, it looks all nice and comparable to like other brands, but then it's been said that over time in the long run, the display loses its sharpness and clearness and vividness after just a few years. And it
Mhm.
will look like dull compared to like say to a newly purchased Pixel 5 phone screen.
Yeah.
And there's even a screen burning issue, which happens simply when somebody uses a single app very extensively, like say Google Maps, for a really like super long time. And that extreme usage would cause like a thing called a ghost watermark of the used app imprinted on the screen permanently.
Mm.
So I'd like to talk about that. So that's just the thing with OLED displays itself. Um, you're gonna have those burn-ins no matter what, but that's what causes the screen to basically not be as bright because of those burn-ins. But other than that, that's not really a Pixel thing. That's just more of a OLED problem. But yeah.
Okay, good. You guys clearly thought about this a lot. The Apple people did too, but this is great. Okay. Okay. The OnePlus.
So for the OnePlus, a lot of the hardware that's in it for their phones are going to be the basically top notch. What's new during the years, and like Google, they're running a simpler Android where it's called like basically stock Android, or like that's what it is.
Okay.
um, and again, it's still in that affordable price range as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it does have that OLED display or OLED display with 120 hertz. So that is the actual upside or the strength.
Okay.
And then compared to the Google Pixel with that OLED display, you can actually run the 120 hertz rather than Google Pixel. You're only running, it says 90, but in reality, it kind of toggles you back to a 60 hertz display.
Okay. Good. Okay. What are the weaknesses of the OnePlus? Oh, let's have a different speaker.
We had talked about a weakness being like the camera software. It's not necessarily like comparable to Apple. It still has like similar like options where it's like if you want to do I think we said why can't I think of the word? The portrait mode or like different things, but you can't just like edit your photo right after you take it.
Mm-hmm.
But Anthony knows more. I honestly just learned about this phone today.
Oh, okay.
So that's the one thing that we really talked about was like the weaknesses of the camera.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
maybe the weakness is that the brand recognition. I mean, we're talking more about the company, but let's go ahead and put down brand recognition.
Yeah, definitely a brand recognition. It's pretty small in the US markets. but
Mm-hmm.
it's more bigger in like the India and UK markets.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So, did you come up with a few other weaknesses?
I guess since it's an affordable price, since you're getting all these top-notch hardware, they have to like skimp out on some other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes, like again, the camera, the speakers aren't the best. I guess since we're talking about audio jack, they don't have the audio jack. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Do you get headphones with it?
You don't actually. Yeah, that's another thing. I don't think you do with the newer ones.
Okay. Why won't this copy paste? All right. Let's pretend like it copy pasted. All right. So I'm
You
gonna
get
try.
the point of it. Yeah.
Okay. So this is great. So you're thinking about your product and you're comparing it to others, and you are looking at the strengths and the weaknesses. And this is something that you'll do as a business. So you'll look at your products side by side and think about their strengths and your weaknesses. But what we're going to push for later is to actually look at a business and think about um, its strengths and its weaknesses. So something I want you to do, why is that not taking me? Oh, well, where did, okay. So one thing I want you to take a look at is the value chain, okay. Okay, so if you remember your economics, margin is where you create economies of scale, right? Margin is more important than profit, because if you're just making straight profit and you don't see margin, then you're in this cycle of not growing your balance sheet, all right? So as we start to take a look at our case study, and we're going to talk about the internal strengths and weaknesses of a company. We're going to move beyond just the product itself, and we're going to decide, okay, is the infrastructure of the firm a strength or a weakness? So we're going to take each of these categories and you're going to say, is the operations a strength or a weakness? So when we're thinking about when you're thinking about the J&J case study, definitely take a look at technology, procurement, logistics, operations, and logistics, right? You can take a look at more of them. I'm just sort of giving you a hint as to where you should be going in terms of strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so that is kind of all we have to cover. It's day 2, so we don't have a lot more to cover. But I do want to check in with everybody. So how are you? How is everything going in terms of uh, understanding this material so far?
Dr. Martin,
Yeah.
can I leave? I have a meeting with Jeff right now.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for letting me know as opposed to just ducking out.
Yeah, sorry. Bye.
Very polite. Bye. Yeah. So keep track of these things, and I would say, I know we've been talking about the case studies that are coming up. So the slides are a give resource, and this word value chain, I'll bring it up again, but this is, you'll use the value chain throughout your interpretation of your case studies, especially when you're looking at your strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat assessments, okay? And if there were 2 diagrams that you should hang over your desk when we go back to work, It's SWOT and then this thing. If you have only these two in a little space on your desk, you'll be thinking like a top-notch manager. Okay. So as I said, that's kind of all I have. If you have more questions about the class, I did create a student lounge for us. So yeah, all right. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. And I think I'm seeing a few of you in 2305. Okay, all right. So I'm ending the meeting now.